even if you're not a political leader, you don't have to be in politics. If you suspect and you notice that something is wrong, do not be an enabler
Mm.
and speak up. And when somebody else is speaking up, don't just easily call them crazy. I have been
Yeah.
called that, and I am still fighting, and I'm still writing, making adjustments to my play. And it has this very, very strong message. Speak up, don't be silent.
Hello, welcome to another edition, a brand new edition of Code Green, Conversations for a Future We Want and Our Kids Deserve. I'm already getting choked up on that line. I am honored. I usually start by saying I'm excited. This one is not about excitement. This one is about emotions. This one is about reality. This one hits close to home. For the woman that I am about to introduce you to is a friend of mine, and we became friends at a critical time about a decade ago after she tragically lost her beautiful daughter due to a camp accident, a tragedy that should never have happened. We had planned to speak this week because there had just been a tree that fell. That's her story, her daughter's story, as you'll hear, in London, a tree that should never have been propped up, and it was just that, literally, that had fatality, casualties, and we're hearing more and more about accidents, not accidents like that. But overriding all this week, of course, is what's happening still unfolding, the unbelievable disaster, not a natural disaster, unnatural disaster in Texas, because the flooding, the torrential rain, yes, perhaps record in terms of how quickly that river rose in such a short time, but not really unexpected in terms of the impact of our human-caused emissions and climate change and the crisis that we climate activists have been losing sleep over, trying to warn people about for years, for decades. And we are going to bring this very close to home. It will be hard to hear some of this perhaps, but Penny and I believe it is so important. Penny, in addition to being a victim of a climate change disaster, is also a very accomplished professional. She is a professional actress. She teaches communications at the Haas School of Business in Berkeley. She has written two plays. She's a playwright. Two of those plays have been produced and seen, and she is writing her biggest one yet, which is about this story, but the bigger message that we have to share with you today. So without further ado, Penny, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm sure on what must be a very particularly emotional time for you.
Thank you so much. Yes, it is. And we don't yet know exactly how things unfolded, but it does feel so much like what happened to me. My daughter was, Annais was 21. She was the art counselor. She was at a summer camp near Yosemite. She was thrilled. And you expect when your child goes to work at a summer camp that they will be safe. And she was not safe. And everybody behaves differently when they get the news that your child, because in my case, she was the only fatality. There were several other counselors who were injured. One of them was very severely injured. And you get this news, and what happened to me is I immediately started, after I got the shock of it, I started researching because as a playwright and also as an actress, when something catches me in language, I research. And when the camp sent out a message the next day, which basically said a tree fell spontaneously, killing Annais Rittenberg, a tragic act of nature, I thought to myself, nothing falls spontaneously. It doesn't happen like that. There's got to be a reason.
Mhm.
And sure enough, I went online and I learned about California black oaks and how they grow and how they will respond to weather and to weather changes. And they have to be monitored if children are near them.
And children were right underneath that tree. It was 12 years ago, almost exactly. Just very briefly, set the scene and what Annais did to save young lives.
Yes, Anais's last words, but you know, it took me 2 years for it to sink in. That's what shock does. Because the other girls who were injured, fortunately, it wasn't the campers, it was the counselors. They weren't severely injured, just one girl
Mhm.
was severely injured. But they came and they told me that Anais shouted out a warning. And the first part of the warning, Anais loved nature. She loved nature. Her first part of the warning was, "Whoa, the tree's falling." And then she added, "Run." And everybody was saved because Anais, her last words were to warn her
Mm.
friends, and she saved lives on that day.
And this was not during a storm. This was on a calm summer morning as they were sitting around having breakfast, as you can imagine, underneath this beautiful black oak tree. It was that sudden.
Yes, there were several oak trees. I could go into a whole background with it, but let me just say, when I researched and I found out why California black oaks will split in two, why they will drop a branch, why it is nearly always in the summer months, June, July, August, in the early hours of the morning. Anais was killed at 8:27 a.m. 2 years later, two little boys, they were 12 years old, they were best friends, were camping in Yosemite on a designated campground. And the only warnings there were beware of bears and rodents. But they had made their tent under California black oak, and the parents were in a tent next to them. And at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, August, it's always in June, July, August, there was a massive sound, and the parents ran out to find the two boys had been crushed to death by the tree.
And something recently happened in London, also summer months.
It was a different, it's not, I don't know the exact way in which cedar trees, that was a cedar tree, but it was an immensely old, and it had been propped up. That's the word, propped up. One of the branches had been propped up by a steel pole for years and years and years and years.
Mm.
And there was no warning sign. People would walk by, and it happened to fall on that particular day, killed a 7-year-old girl, a 6-year-old girl fighting for her life. About 50 passers-by ran up to try and lift the branch. They couldn't lift the branch. It was so heavy. So maintenance or the tree's fault? I say it's maintenance. And from my own experience, that's also where I am responding to. I don't have obviously all the facts with the flood and the summer camps in Texas, but it's like, aren't you aware? I mean, there've been over 100 years. There were four floods. There was one in 1987. I wonder what they did about that.
Well, and we are in a new weather era, and we're going to get to that.
Absolutely.
And that is really the underlying, the common denominator in all these. Yes, trees fell down in this flooding in Texas. So many of them are down, but that it's not that, it's the flood. But what it is Mother Nature. We have been fueling Mother Nature. Remember that commercial? It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. We've been fueling her for decades and decades, and we have been warning people that this is not your father's fire or flood or hurricane. These are weather events, extreme weather events on steroids, and whether it is extreme drought contributing to a huge branch falling, and I don't know why they would keep this tree propped up. I mean, cut it down. I mean, so not all trees should be alive and standing
Well,
upright or trying to. And of course, in the case of Texas, the politicians there don't even want to acknowledge climate change. And we can talk about that because I do think it is a big part of the story. But for me, who just moved from Hill Country within an hour of where this happened back to the Bay Area and knowing, you know, Governor Abbott and Daniel Patrick, the assistant governor, that they, like Trump and Trump's administration, refused to acknowledge, or utter the words climate change. It's an act of God. All we can do is pray. Climate change is barely mentioned even in the coverage now, so just in passing. And that is the underlying common cause here, that it's not what you been through before. And people have not evacuated in time because they've been through fires, they've been through floods. And I can tell you the signature because I obsessively watch and record all these stories. We've never seen anything like this before. We've been through floods, we've been through fires, we've been through tornadoes. This was different. This was different. That is the signature of climate change, our current weather reality. And we are going to make sure that nobody who's watching this interview leaves without knowing that we have to all be vigilant because this can happen to, God forbid, any of us. Penny is here to say it hit her family and she wasn't there. She had no control. And that's the part that, you know, everyone's thinking, God, there, but for the grace of God, you know, these parents dropped their kids off at camp. You took your daughter to, you know, as a counselor. You never think about that, but people have to be aware that not only their own safety and their own family safety, but especially when you're, you know, taking care of other people, children and otherwise, we're just in a new era. I don't see eucalyptus trees the same because of knowing you, Penny. I see them as dangerous, you know, or anything that's too tall or old or maybe tilting a little bit. I won't sit under a pine tree because of knowing you. And because of knowing me, you say you have learned a lot about our current climate reality. And that's why we all need to communicate what we know.
Yes, because until I met you, I wasn't myself. I wasn't so aware. I'm now more aware. And yet, on that day after Annais was killed, when they said the tree fell spontaneously, killing Annais Rittenberg, you know, a tragic act of nature, I began to research. And what I found is that I understand what makes California oaks behave as they do under certain weather conditions. And if it's exacerbated by climate, it's going to be worse. And I remember saying to you, Betsy, this is 12 years ago.
When we met.
Anais is the canary in the cave. If we continue to avoid the warnings and not listen to the warnings of Mother Nature, a child is going to die. And now we've got children dying.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to say, you know, I was the only parent who lost a child there. And so I was on my own trying to figure out what was going on. But we all need to be responsible because you do not want to end up the person who's lost a young child. I saw a photograph this morning of the two sisters who drowned and they were found holding hands.
Oh my
And
God.
I saw yesterday two brothers who were there. They were young. I think the kid couldn't have been more than 11. And he's talking about the walls collapsing. And he climbed up onto the top bunk because the water had risen there. And thank God he could swim away.
Yeah. And
And it's not good enough. We all need to pay attention, which is why I wanted to talk on your show to you, because that's what you've been saying ever since I've known you, and I know long time before.
And we didn't meet because of climate change. We happened to be at a health retreat. And as we were going around the table introducing ourselves, and you said that you had a daughter who was killed at a Jewish camp. And I happened to have sent my 9-year-old daughter off to Jewish camp in Maine, a different camp, different time. But I didn't want her to go that far away. And for so long, she wanted to go. And I remember my heart ached literally when we drove away from that camp. She didn't swim at the time. It was a big lake there. You know, Jewish mother, any mother worry. And so when I read about what happened to Anais before we met, my heart went out to the family. And then to have just serendipitously met you a year later, I immediately started crying because you know, God forbid, and we became fast friends. And the fact that we're doing this interview now, you know, I just started this new video series recently, and it was because of the anniversary of Annais's death, and also what happened in London last week or two, and now Texas. it seems like Mother Nature is screaming at us, saying, pay attention, ignore this at our own peril. And for me, where the anger comes is, with anyone who purports to be a leader, politician, a political leader, national, state, regional, local, you name it, to not believe in science, to not be talking about this, to warn people, and to be actively ignoring it, which what one particular political party does consistently. Not one Republican voted for the Climate Act. That's why I can say that. And even now in Texas, they're not mentioning it being anything other than who could have foreseen this? That's what Trump just said. No one, and Governor Abbott, no one could have foreseen this. This happened so fast. Granted, this is unusual. It rose so fast, but it was not completely unforeseeable if you listen to the scientists and the climate activists who have been trying to warn. And we're sadly, tragically, only going to see more of these. So everybody needs to make it their business. We need to all be ambassadors for each other to talk about this, even if our politicians won't, and not to vote for any candidate who does not accept the science of our climate crisis. And of course, it's not just extreme weather, it's our oceans, it's, diseases like pandemics like COVID. It's all connected. Climate is the great exacerbator. People need to understand that it is a complicated problem. It is huge. And it's also here now. It's not a future problem. And that's what I hope this conversation will lead people to realize. You have to have that vigilance.
And also, just to say, and that may be because I come from South Africa, not to be afraid to speak up. All of us, the parents, even if you're not a political leader, you don't have to be in politics. If you suspect and you notice that something is wrong, do not be an enabler
Hmm.
and speak up. And when somebody else is speaking up, don't just easily call them crazy. I have been
Yeah.
called that, and I am still fighting, and I'm still writing, making adjustments to my play. And it has this very, very strong message. Speak up, don't be silent.
And you have had incredible response to your TED Talk, which was very courageous. And I'm sure hard for you to do. Not, you're a professional speaker, but just emotionally, I would think.
Well, I think for me, the TED Talk, it's called How to Speak About the Loss of a Child, because people don't know. They're scared. They think, I shouldn't ask these questions. But actually, the person who lost their child wants to speak about their child. And so in this TED Talk, I talk about that, and I give the example of having been in Tanzania and working with young African children who were orphans. And I reenact a scene with exact words that they used. They weren't afraid of me. They wanted to know what happened. And it healed me.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important not to think you can't catch grief from anyone. You can just come with kindness.
And you have been such a wonderful spokeswoman for that. And I admire, as so many do, your courage, your grace in this. And, it's every parent's worst nightmare. And you have lived it through no fault of your own. And Annais is gone for no. And the fact that she was such a nature lover, I've seen some of her writings, and she was a student at UC Santa Cruz. She loved the ocean. And hearing these stories, she was such a beautiful spirit. Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, Anais, from the time she was a little kid, I remember she was like 4 years old, and we lived in Berkeley, and it was summer. She was sitting on the front steps with, one of those tank tops, and she had snails going up her arms and looking at them, absolutely loving them. And she said to me, Mom, it's not fair. I need more pets. And I said to Anais, well, you've got a bird, you've got rats. You've got fire-bellied toads, and you've got a dog now. She says, yes, but I need something more. How about a cow? And she was like that. And she went to Africa when she was very young on safari. When we went on safari, you sit in those combis, those open combis, but really open. And Annais sat in the front seat, in the front of the, not inside the combi, but outside next to the tracker. And she understood nature. I mean, any horse would come to her, any animal. And when she was 15, she worked on an animal sanctuary in South Africa, and she fell in love with a baby rhinoceros called Blixen, who was 2,000 pounds then, because he
I
was still a baby. I think he grew to
think she didn't try to bring him
5,000
home.
pounds. But she loved him and she kissed him on the lips because he was so cute. So she was great fun, and she was doing environmental studies. She would have gone to work with Jane Goodall. She was fantastic with children. She loved kids. She loved arts. She was, in Yiddish, my grandmother would have called her a wilde Chaya, a wild creature. She was wild and she was funny and she was deep. And it's a terrible loss
We're going to
for me and for the world.
and don't stop the watching this right now, because at the very end we're going to hear Annais singing, and I encourage you to have some Kleenex nearby. But we're not doing this to manipulate you. We're doing this to share who she was, who she might have been, who she should have been, and in just a beautiful, beautiful spirit. And I think it's the most moving thing I've seen. So we're going to share that in just a few minutes. But let's now bring it back to Texas. And, everybody, there's going to be so many investigations. The communication, of course, was not ideal. It was the middle of it was a perfect storm. Record rainfall, which it absolutely was fueled by climate change. That's what all the scientific analysis are saying. It's not that it caused it, it enhances it. It's like if you're a baseball player and you're a regular hitter, when you take steroids, you're going to hit it out of the park more. It makes it stronger. And that is what we're seeing over and over and over again. And that has to be anticipated. So they probably didn't have cell service. I'm sure people didn't have their phones on overnight. Certainly the camp owners, they've been there for decades and over a century. I think that Camp Mystic was, they should have known. They should have had all alarms going. They should have taken precautions. And when they say this has never happened before, that's right. We're going to see more things that have never happened before. That is what needs to be understood. And if nothing else comes out of this unspeakable tragedy, times however many have died and are still missing, and the fact that it's young children, just there's almost no words. I don't have to give words to you. Is it's just hard to even think about. And so if we can do anything to avoid this happening unnecessarily over and over and over again, that's why I do this work. It's to warn people. And we environmentalists, we climate activists, advocates, whatever you want to call it, we get dismissed, been on Fox, been called hysterical socialist, tree hugging, crazy woman. Right, right, right. What if it was their children, right? And Ted Cruz was on talking about how his kids just got back from camp, and God forbid it might have been one of his young daughters who were the same age. I'm not going to say what if it had been one of theirs? Would that change their opinion on the need to accept climate control as a reality? I mean, we were there during the historic freeze in 2021. They'd never had a freeze like that lasted 5, 6 days, and people died because they didn't have heat. A 9-year-old in a trailer froze to death overnight because his parents didn't have heat. That should never, never ever happen. And yet, still in Texas, they're not acknowledging and it's not just Texas, but it seems to be, a place where a lot of these extreme weather events happen, and the politicians are especially regressive. So I shout, wake up and smell the carbon. And, we can't change these Neanderthals who are in office, but please, if you love your kids, country, or planet, don't ever vote for anybody who does not deal with scientific reality. We can't afford that. What else would you like to share before we conclude at this
I would
very
just like to say that the video you're going to play of Annais singing Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, we found amongst her things, her belongings, her little belongings. And at one point when I was writing the play, which is called If a Tree Falls, dot, 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 um, because Leonard Cohen's music had helped me so much after Annais was killed. I used to play it all the time, all the time. I wrote to Leonard Cohen's agent, his lawyer, and I told him I wanted to thank Leonard Cohen, and he immediately sent me a book of Leonard's poetry signed. And then he asked to read the play, and he read the play, and I asked him if I would be able to use the video of Anais singing the Hallelujah, and he watched it and he said, absolutely. So that's the video. Anais took it of herself, and it's she wasn't trained as a singer. She just loved music so much and life.
And I don't know anyone who doesn't love that song, especially when Leonard Cohen sings it. And I can't hear that song again without picturing your beautiful daughter. And I wish I had known her, but I feel like I have somewhat through you and through your play. And I wish you a production soon, coming to every live theater location, playhouse around this country, because it is so timely, so relevant, so poignant, and you're a perfect person, unfortunately, in some ways, to tell this story. So it must be told. There's a bigger takeaway than just your personal tragedy, but that alone is worth witnessing,
Yeah.
and
Well,
acknowledging.
I've been, this is about the 15th, what do you call it? I've forgotten the word now, but when
Right?
you rewrite, yes. And I'm starting it in a different way, if you can imagine. I worked out it, and it is different and it is strong. It's very good.
Mm.
I'm very happy with it now.
Penny Kreitzer, I'm very happy that we are friends, that we met when we did, and hope we can help each other cope. I have had different kind of tragic losses in my family, in my life. Maybe I'll share that someday because it's why I do what I do. Not directly related to environmental issues, but it's something I know too well, also grief. And so when we connected, it was immediate, and I understood and could only imagine in your particular circumstance. So that's a bond that I respect and I treasure, and wish you strength.
Thank you so
All
much.
of us strength.
Thank you so much, Betsy.
Okay. May we all talk about what needs to be said. Pushing things under the rug does nobody any good. And it is a matter of life and death these days. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight overthrew ya. She tied you to a kitchen chair, she broke your throne and she cut your hair, and through the lips she drew the hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Baby, I've been here before. I know this room, I've walked this floor. I used to live alone before I knew ya. I've seen your flag on the marble arch. Love is not a victory march. It's a cold and it's a broken